tea lovers, settle in because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose. And today we're bringing you the tea.
Across eras. Can you believe next week is Christmas?
It seriously snuck up on me a lot. Trying to plan all of the everything plans with all of our family turns out to always be a bit of a dance. But it's a fun dance because you want to see everybody.
I like to see people on Christmas Eve. My family sometimes does like a Christmas Eve thing.
That's cool.
And now that my daughter's grown, so she doesn't live there anymore. She's in a different state. Now that she's grown, I'm like, I'm going to sleep in. Because my job closes for the holidays. Mm-hmm. I'm off for like 12 days and it's amazing. And the whole place is closed and I don't have to look at my email or answer my phone.
I will be working on Christmas, but can I just say, if prank calling is your bag, don't do it. Not on Christmas. Nope.
It's super weird, dude.
There's an interesting holiday worker solidarity, though, that everyone I talk to, like on the professional side of things, it's just always this sort of like almost manic, giggly, like, well, we're here.
I know.
It's kind of fun.
So let's say if you have to run to like the CVS or whatever, and somebody's working there, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you have to work today. Don't say that.
No.
They're thinking,
I wouldn't have to if you weren't here.
Here, I wouldn't be working. Just tip everyone on Christmas Day is my theory.
No, tip higher than normal.
I don't know if my local Walgreens employee would accept a tip, but, you know.
You gotta try at least.
Right?
Boston watching.
And you can have a different opinion on this. Tipping's super controversial, I know.
Tipping's extremely controversial. Basically, do something nice if you are given the opportunity, especially to people that have to work so much during this season.
Right. And you all know, it's not just Christmas, it's the whole holiday season. It's busy. And that's why we're going to tell you before we get into this episode, we're going to take a break.
Yep, we're going to take a holiday break. For us, it's Christmas. But for all of you out there, have a happy holiday of your choosing, if indeed you choose to celebrate a holiday at all.
Yeah, and before, you should pause this episode really quickly and like and follow.
I'm going to say this completely non-ironically. The best is yet to come.
Rose is so right. That's going to be our first week of 2025.
That will be the first episode of 2025.
The best is yet to come.
The best is yet to come. Hello.
Hey, dude. What's up? Do you like my sweater?
I really do. That's super cute. Cable knitting is so pretty.
So, yeah, I got it last night. It was given to me as my Christmas gift. And I knew where it was from, but it wasn't until today that I found the tag, which reads, The Tortured Poets Department.
Excellent name. I'll just say.
Right, I know. It's so fun. And this isn't a kind of sweater I usually wear, but...
Oh, I love me a good cardigan.
I
like a longer one, personally.
Same. That would be, I think, what I would normally wear, but I do like this.
Yeah. It's sort of like the next evolution of the dad sweater.
Right. So, for absolutely no reason at all, I've been thinking about things like the French Revolution, Vigilantism, and income disparity. So I started by just being like, yo, AI, what's the start point? What do we know about this? Vigilantism. I'm sure it's way further than this, but it referred me to some Greek and Roman examples. So I went and looked those up.
Oh, yeah. People taking a situation into their own hands is as old as people.
Exactly. In ancient societies, vigilante justice was normal. I don't think it was called vigilante justice so much then, depending.
I think the concept really existed in the same way because the way that your government interacts with you in terms of crime is not a static thing. That's something that is part of how a society decides to define itself.
Right. So, like, Rome had a very complex and robust legal system, but that did not stop people from things. And so vigilante justice, that's when private citizens basically are taking the law into their own hands to punish wrongdoers. Mob violence was very common in ancient Rome. Julius Caesar's assassination, for example,
That's the classic.
Right. And it's not like a direct singular act of vigilante justice. So it says here, the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC by a group of senators can be seen as a form of vigilante justice. The senators felt justified in their actions but they bypassed the formal legal process that the Roman Republic had at that time.
Right. And the interest of that story is in the steps that led those people into believing that that was their only choice, that that was the only route forward.
Right.
And that's, I mean, with Julius Caesar, it's a million different arguments. I was actually just watching, there is a miniseries of Cleopatra that I think came out in like the early 2000s that has always been my favorite. I really love the girl that they got to play Cleopatra. Leonora Varela, Timothy Dalton playing Julius Caesar, which is hilarious. But it was a really cool focus on how his involvement in Egyptian politics kind of allowed his involvement in Roman politics to erode, to the point that was at least a major contributing factor to his eventual assassination, because people didn't believe that he was still invested in their country in the same way.
Right.
And he had a disparate amount of power to not be that invested.
Happens. So in medieval Europe, we have vigilante groups forming. For example, in Germany, forgive my mispronunciation, we have the Wehrmacht. I looked that up, I don't know.
I think that's on.
And there was also the Night Watch in England. Those were groups formed to maintain order and punish criminals. They operated outside of the legal system and used secret trials and harsh punishments.
It's like the neighborhood watch. It's the idea of let's all watch out for each other. That's an organically good idea. And then there's always people that think that, well, everybody else is just crap and I should clearly be in charge of this. And it often degrades.
That's why we have Karen videos. So the Wehrmacht was a system of secret tribunals that operated in Westphalia, Germany during the late Middle Ages. It was actually very powerful and mysterious, which I love, shrouded in secrecy.
Sorry, that just made me think of Eddie Izzard, just like sex, death, and religion in a very nighttime telly sort of way.
So secret proceedings, members being secretive, trials only attended by members, symbolism. If this is sounding like Freemasonry and all that stuff, you're right. They claim a very wide-ranging jurisdiction over things.
And I think this is definitely separated from mob justice in a way, just because this is a very structured, codified. People have sat down and thought about, I would prefer my area to be running this way, and I'm just going to make it happen. Versus, I need to fix this right now. It's in front of me and I'm mad. Those are two different kinds of vigilance.
That's exactly what happened in Korea recently. You know, the president, I don't know what he was thinking. I wondered if he was like, call my bluff.
Yeah, honestly, and if you're going to declare martial law and you don't have the backing behind it.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, so that would be more like mob justice. This is definitely more structured, and their punishments were very harsh. A lot of deaths. A lot of wild fines. They did begin to decline in power around the 15th century because the power of the princes in the territories was growing and the central authority from the Holy Roman Empire was fading.
And anytime you have a large area being governed by a single point, the application of law is just really difficult to maintain stasis on.
By the 16th century, most of this group had largely disappeared, although there's a couple things here and there point to maybe some of it remaining until the 18th century. The one most people I think know about, the French Revolution. So near the end of the 1700s, income disparity in France was really bad. Income disparity meaning the few people at the top had lots of money and the most people who were at the bottom had very little money. And I'm putting this in the most generic terms.
Yeah, this isn't a moralizing argument. This is interesting steps that happen before a history-altering event.
Yeah.
This is not immoral. There's so much that has to happen to support the cream crest of the top.
Yeah.
Especially in a society that's only kind of getting into industrialization. Sure, you're definitely getting mechanized industry.
Right.
But it's not in the kind of way that's going to avoid having to have a massive workforce. You have to have a massive workforce in order to create the fancy things.
Exactly. So at this time, the third estate, as they called it, which was like most of the commoners, they were paying the majority of the taxes, while the first estate, which is clergy, and then the second estates, nobility, were exempt.
We still have those who fight, those who work, and those who pray. That structure still is how everything is built.
So I don't know a whole lot about tax loopholes, mostly because don't even make near enough money to even consider
we exist in the space where taxes are just sort of, well, all right, and then move on.
Right. But I just finished reading this book. It's a fictional book by, I think it's Kevin Kwan. Yeah. He wrote Crazy Rich Asians. So I'm reading his new book, Lies and Marriages. One of the main characters is being told by someone who's wealthy, yeah, I know people who own several houses on this street or in this area. These are apparently very extravagant, nice houses. And she's like, oh, they live here? And he's like, oh, no, they keep them empty. And she's like, why wouldn't you rent them out? And he says, well, because you could charge rent of $40,000 a month here. And so that's an income loss of $40,000 a month. What?
Yeah. You make more money off of the perceived loss of your property than you do from actually using it. So there's no incentive to use it.
Right.
Kills
so
housing prices.
That works well for me when, let's say, I decide to publish a book and I put in, for example, let's just say $100 into marketing it. And then I get my taxes and I've made, let's say, $30, but I put in $100, so that's a loss.
You're operating at a loss. You can claim that loss.
And I mean, obviously, I don't want it to be that way forever. That's not my end goal, because I'm a normal human being.
That structure existing, it allows people to do a lot of sidestepping rather than contribute to their society.
Right. So the first and second estates, despite making up like this very small percentage of the population, they own most of the land and wealth.
And you have to think, too, the clergy owning most of the land, that the Catholic Church was the largest landowner in the medieval world.
Yes.
And France did not have Henry VIII saying, we're taking all the land away from the church and giving it to the nobility. So the church still owns that land in its majority in France at this point.
Yep. And so this is the time of Marie Antoinette and the whole let them eat cake.
Apocryphal story,
thing.
Can I just say?
Right. I hope that you know this story. If not, the least you could do is watch the movie version with Kirsten Dunst that is in no way historically accurate-ish.
No, mostly not. No, I think it was accurate in its portrayal of her probable emotional journey.
Correct. It's a great movie.
Emotionally beautiful. The opulence, like they worked very hard on like the visual accuracy.
Oh, so good.
And I think they did do a lot of good. I think there were obviously some costume choices that were very cinematic. I still enjoyed them, but it's just, obviously that's not happening.
Right.
But I do think it was well done, and I think it portrayed
good.
The story pretty well.
So Marie Antoinette, when she's like a youngin', she marries the Crown Prince of France in 1770. And then she becomes the queen in 1775 when her husband is crowned king. She lived a life of excess.
There's a little bit of context here. So she walked into Versailles at its height.
Yes.
When all of the rules were codified and crunched up into these immovable things.
And as queen to be, you did not get to disturb that balance. It didn't matter what you thought about it.
You do not. So the generation previous had all of this time to get used to the fact that the reason that Versailles was so strict and so structured was to distract the nobility from creating trouble anywhere else.
It was a genius move.
It's a genius move. Louis XIV. He built this structure to control people. The structure exists to control people. It's really, really good at controlling people. And then you walk in here as Marie Antoinette as an essential child.
Yeah. From
Austria, she's used to noble structures. She's used to the governing structures. And she knows her role. But she had no way of anticipating the level of control that she encountered.
Exactly. Around the time she went and had her cottage area built. Yeah. Around that time, she was really into the OG cottagecore dresses, basically.
The pastoral playground.
Yeah, and yes, it was all make-believe. But one thing that it did that really hurt the people was it put all these silk and other heavy material designers in a big pinch. She didn't want those anymore, and now they were out of a job.
Our industry is built around your need, and what do you mean? Rich people love to cosplay as poor people.
Well, yeah, that could be a whole episode. Literally 0 people have recorded proof of this. When Marie Antoinette learned that her people that she governed could not afford bread, she supposedly said, let them eat cake.
There is no documentation for this. She was very unpopular because a lot of the government's money was going towards, her earrings. I can see that being an argument.
100%.
She doesn't have any kind of context to understand what it's like to not know where your bread is coming from. And so I think that that's a reasonable critique of her, not understanding the situation. But the let them eat cake story was a political hit job.
Absolutely. We've covered those before. This extreme inequality coupled with social, political injustices, it was a spark for the French Revolution.
They had the American Revolution to look at that had literally just happened, that France had assisted in. And all of these people are looking at their government like, well, you'll support these people across the ocean in having a freedom that you will not let us have.
Exactly.
That's just adding fuel to the fire. Our tax dollars are going to a war on a different continent in order to secure protections that we will never have. That makes people angry.
Yeah, it does. So the French Revolution, the kickoff is when the common people stormed the castle, to make a very long story short.
The storming of Bastille?
Yep.
Bastille Day.
Yep. And they took the king, queen, their kids, and a whole bunch of other people captive. Eventually they were all murdered. The French Revolution kind of reminded me a little bit, so I'm going to jump out of order for a second, of income disparity in modern day USA. So it was a little difficult. Do you wear the train?
It's picturesque here, isn't it?
Okay, but the train confuses me because the train tracks right over there are blocked off.
It's not the train track over there. You can actually hear it from the main station.
Okay, it's that one.
It just echoes.
So, anyways, it was hard to find exact numbers, okay? But basically, what you need to know is, while we are not France and we don't have a king or queen, and we've got a different social and economic structure, the income equality is still also a big thing at the moment.
It's never stopped being a thing. It's gotten to the point now that the goalposts move quite quickly.
Right. A few people at the top hold the majority of funds. And that is a problem, but we're not getting into that today. But the difference is that currently people who are in the lower end are not rising as fast as people in the higher end. So
the gap is widening.
For every 4 steps someone at the top takes, everyone else can only take 1. That is becoming a problem. Here's my example. In 1963, the wealthiest families in the USA had 36 times the wealth of the average middle class, or middle in the wealth distribution, okay? 36 times. By 2022, they had 71 times the wealth of families in the middle.
The wealthy end of the spectrum having all of the funds at their disposal hurts the economy in other ways than just the people at the bottom not having the money. Because when that is flipped and you have more of the wealth distribution at the lower end, those people are spending money more often. The more money you have, the less you have to spend. And thus, there is just less in the economy.
You better believe if I came into a ton of money, I would not buy houses that sit empty.
No, exactly.
It is a little difficult, of course, to compare inequality in France at the time of the French Revolution to inequality in the USA.
It's a broad stroke comparison, but it's not irrelevant.
The underlying issue is a few people have the most and they're taking more of mine. Like, there's less for me to get because they're taking more. Do you understand this?
There is always a breaking point, that crack moment where you no longer really care what the consequences will be.
And it really is awful that anything goes on long enough to get to that point.
But it really often does.
It does. So, stepping back in time again, during the American Wild West frontier days, groups like the Regulators, the Committees of Vigilance in California were formed. There was huge population growth during gold rushes. So around 1851 and then again in 1856, the Committee of Vigilance of San Francisco, they took matters into their own hands and they're like, we're combating crime and corruption. The town had about 900 people and grew within just a few years to 20,000.
That's not handleable.
Right. Problem was that they carried out their own trials and their own punishments, and they included hanging.
It's not a romanticized vision for vigilante justice.
No.
It really often goes very badly.
Yeah, that's not at all what I'm suggesting. However, because the town grew so big, people were like, well, they've overwhelmed law enforcement, so this is what I got to do. Unfortunately, they hung 8 people, and they forced several elected officials to resign. Every 3 months, each committee of vigilance would formally relinquish their power.
Interesting.
Right?
Term limits.
Right.
Within a vigilante structure.
Yeah, that was weird, huh? One of the men they hung was an Australian man named John Jenkins from Sydney. He was accused of burglary. These 2 other guys, Samuel Whitaker and Robert McKenzie, who were associates of another dude from Australia who was hung, they were lynched 3 days after a standoff between the committee and the police force who were trying to protect prisoners when the committee went in and stormed the jail during Sunday church services. There's also the Regulators of North Carolina, active in the 18th century.
Outlander!
Yes,
Sorry.
This is exactly what I was thinking. They were formed to combat lawlessness and corruption in the backcountry of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. They definitely used violence and intimidation.
Immediately considered a problem by the governing structure from England, which, again, if you're governing a large area from a central point, it's really, really, really hard to have a ubiquitous legal system.
Right, that was why I had to add them in there, because that's the season I'm on of Outlander. I had to take a break, so I'm watching, Christmas horror comedies. Horror comedies are my favorite. If you haven't watched My Best Friend's Exorcism, and you haven't, then you should, because it's really good, and the author of that book is also really good, and you need to read all his books.
Mine is Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh yeah, that's actually on my list. Yeah,
I love that movie so much.
Yeah.
I'd watch Wash in anything. That is not his name. Alan Tudyk, I think I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I would watch him butter toast.
So the Regulators, they were colonists. They formed in rebellion to the English government.
The first little sparks of the revolution start with the Regulators' necessity.
Yeah, it's the same thing as in France. This led to the beginning. And these people, again, they're paying all the taxes, all the fees.
When you're paying a large amount of taxes and you're not seeing return, of course you're angry.
I'm going to give you guys this example. So England is saying, we send our own tea to the colonies, so we're going to put a tariff on the colonies. That means the colonies are paying for it.
Right. That's not punishing anybody except the person that is paying for the tea.
Yes, and this is a reverse situation because the person supplying the good is putting the tariff on the buyer. This is not a situation where a person not producing the goods said, you want to sell these on my front porch? Fine, but I'm charging you a tariff. That's the difference.
The person who wants to sell on the front porch is fine, I'll pay that tariff in order to have this space, but I'm going to pass that cost right along.
Exactly.
The only person that always loses every time is the consumer.
Yeah. The Regulators kind of came to an end in May of 1771. They were defeated. In the Battle of Alamance, most of them were hanged. Few were pardoned. They started, for the most part, trying to go through the proper legal channels, and they were just getting shut down and manipulated at every instance.
If you don't have access to the proper
plot, but I am.
No. if you don't get access to the benefits of the structure, eventually you stop trying to use it.
Right. And they picked their name because they wanted to basically regulate their own lives. They felt like they didn't need government representation.
Yeah, when you feel like you're creating new worlds, I think that it probably does chafe a whole lot more for the old world to come knocking on the back door like, you know, we still own you technically.
Right.
No, I've walked off the map. You're no longer a factor.
So the Regulators, their land was like way more productive than the coastal plains, but they were taxed at the same rate. So percentage-wise, they were paying a lot more.
Yeah.
So moving right along to the modern era, vigilante justice still occurs. A lot of times it's motivated by ethnic reasons, religious reasons, social reasons, political reasons. But don't go thinking that is a good thing. Vigilante justice,
we're not advocating it. We're just saying that
isn't always good.
I don't think it's even necessarily a argument of good versus bad.
Right, it feels so dumb to have to put this on everything. I'm like, everyone knows that I'm not doing that. But I don't know what everyone knows.
No, but you can still look at the steps that lead to a history-changing event.
Yeah, that's all I'm doing.
With interest, because it is interesting, because it does directly affect us.
Right,
it always has.
The KKK was a vigilante justice group, and I mean, who would want to be associated with that garbage?
No, but if you don't know about it, then you can't combat the new versions of it.
Right. So a lot of lynch mobs being a form of a vigilante group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, if you've watched Outlander, you'll know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I come from the deep south, and like the area right maybe a mile down the road from where I lived was a sundown town previously, which is so grody.
We like to think that we're so far distant from that part of our history, and there are so many people still living that have lived it.
Right.
We are not distant from that.
Also, in recent decades, we've kind of seen a rise in basically like self-defense militias here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
But also all over the world. Recently, a president was just ousted in Syria.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a militia takeover.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, there's no armies waiting for us, like nothing. I think he bounced and went to Russia, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's another example of a self-defense, quote-unquote, militia.
Results may vary.
We now have online vigilante groups, like armchair detectives, all that kind of thing. And
informational vigilantism is such an interesting corner.
It really is. But the problem with a lot of this is it can be wrong. So
Very.
Doxing happens, swatting happens, general harassment happens. For example, a young man named Sunil Tripathi, and I apologize for probably butchering his name. He was a student here in the USA, and he went missing on March 16th of 2013. His disappearance, however, received widespread media attention because it turned out that Reddit had decided that he was the suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing.
Okay, I didn't remember his name, but I do remember it. Mm-hmm.
Right. And
he'd been convicted by the court of public opinion.
Right. He'd actually been missing for almost a month before his body was found. And that, unfortunately, of course, was after the two actual committers of the crime were apprehended. Mm-hmm. You really have to be careful. I understand in some cases the public desire to help. It can hinder things.
Real problem.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, we have some cases now where we don't get a really high-profile case will happen and we don't get a lot of info right away. Do you remember the two girls in Indiana, Libby and Abby?
Vaguely. I remember you telling me about that.
So Libby and Abby, they were two girls in Indiana. Yeah, 2017, they were from Delphi, Indiana. They went walking in like a public park area. Seems like maybe more rural than like our typical city parks that we have. They disappeared, but one of the girls on her phone had made a video where you could see a man walking behind them, and it had a bit of an audio. Well, a lot of the information was kept back from the public because it was so horrible when they found the girls that it wasn't until a long time later that it was released that their bodies were found. Nobody official called it ritualistically, but it seemed to be. And then they made an arrest, this loser, in, I think, 2023. And it wasn't until after his trial concluded that information came out because there was a possibility of so much misinformation.
Right. And there's so many advantages to keeping that information close to the vest in an investigation.
So that brings us today. And I literally mean today, recording the 9th of December. Today, you probably are aware that a healthcare CEO was shot and killed in New York City. So today, the police have named a 26-year-old man, Luigi Mangione, as a, quote, strong person of interest. He was arrested in Pennsylvania on firearms charges. When he was arrested, he supposedly had a ghost gun on him. And a ghost gun is basically like a kit that you can make 3D print a gun at home. Yeah,
it takes very little actual like metal material to make something almost untraceable. Ghost guns,
and it is untraceable. That's the thing. You can't. You don't get serial numbers, and you don't get background checks. So because of that, that makes it illegal.
Right.
They said that when they saw the suspect, supposedly a McDonald's employee, called the den. I really hope by the time we're listening to this, this has been clarified, but maybe not. Maybe not. They said that he was wearing similar clothing to what the pictures of him, but I also recall that they found what they thought was his backpack with his jacket in it and Monopoly money. So I don't understand what similar clothing means, but like I said, I assume we'll find out more. So I'm just reporting the news as it is right now. When he was arrested, they said a manifesto critical of health care companies was found in his possession.
That doesn't make him unique.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that have those.
with quotes CNN said came from, quote, a police officer who has seen the document, which again, I am not going to believe any of this until I see some facts.
That's also a little bit of a telephone game there.
Exactly. Also, everybody knew that when this person was arrested, it was going to be something.
Right.
Like, apparently some of his writings or musings said, these parasites had it coming, and then I do apologize for any strife and trauma, but it had to be done. I don't know, kind of sus to me.
I think it's interesting that the guy is alive. I think that in a lot of these high-profile cases, they're always trying to armchair psychiatry somebody that dies in the attempt to arrest them.
Also think that in our country there's a long-standing tradition of arresting people who are white and shooting people who aren't. Like, they half the time they don't make it to trial.
Statistically, it's just that's
which
how
in
it
itself
often goes.
Vigilante justice? What? Did I just go full circle? I feel like a genius. Also, the police have said that he was carrying several fake IDs, which they're like already online for us all to view. Mm-hmm. And one of them apparently had the name that he used to check into the hostel.
Oh.
I don't believe anything yet. I mean, he hasn't confessed.
Right.
I don't mean the person who died was just some guy. He unfortunately took on a role that does involve making huge sweeping decisions about people's health and well-being, and that is a rough job.
But the reason that this story is so interesting to so many people is that he presided over a predatory system that required a large number of peons supporting from the underside, and so he's not getting a whole lot of sympathy from those quarters for reasons that are not untrue.
Right. Not to dox myself, but it's back to Reddit. The other day, somebody had posted like a screenshot of some LinkedIn article that said like, everyone's terrible for laughing. I guess the company's Facebook post about it had like 70,000 reactions, but like 65,000 of them are the laughing reaction. I don't have Facebook. I didn't look. I posted something. I was like, yeah, because of like these 10 reasons, and this is just like a short list. And it's basically like, you're a billionaire, and yet people still sleep on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. All these things, and I got over 100 different Reddit awards, which is a crazy waste of money. Yeah, some people agreed.
Interesting.
Right, so the man who was arrested doesn't have a criminal history, and they said they did not have his name on a list of suspects.
Because you can't cry the normal, he was in mental health crisis, or he already had these proclivities. This is weird because it's a seemingly normal-ish person snapping.
If Luigi
is
the person,
right,
and if the Twitter account that people are posting screenshots of was actually his, then it seems like at one point he may or may not have had a back injury. Mm-hmm. There was an x-ray photo going around online today of like a spine with pins in it.
I mean, that's not insignificant.
Nope.
It only takes one real incident to just bury you in healthcare costs in this country. That's just...
Dude, I know. Like, at the moment, this is insane. At the moment, I don't have healthcare. Yeah,
and that's just wild.
And not because my job doesn't offer it. They do.
No, it's situational, but the fact that situation exists.
Right. There's a whole different reason why I don't have it at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I had to go to like the clinic attached to my job. Yeah, this is crazy that I don't have insurance. And I was like, I just need my medicine refilled, but I'm going to have to self-pay. Mm-hmm. And you would have thought I told them...
You grew a third eye the second you tried to not use insurance.
They made it sound like it was going to cost me like $725, $1,000, $5,000, I don't know. It was $125. Is that annoying? Of course it is.
Obviously, it's prohibitive for a lot of people, and thank God it wasn't for you.
Right. So, a couple of things to round this up. This is a direct quote from AI. Y'all ready? It is important to note that vigilantism is generally considered illegal and harmful, as it undermines the rule of law and leads to violence and injustice.
Even AI said generally.
Yeah. So, that's the thing. Like, sometimes it is born out of a desire to protect, make a change, get revenge. Have you seen the Denzel Washington movie, John Q?
I have not.
It's super good. He plays a dad whose, 7-year-old kid needs a heart transplant. Can't get it. He takes the hospital hostage.
Oh, I've heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. So, it can be motivated out of desire,
It doesn't mean that the action is right or that the result is going to be desirable, but you can really understand the steps that lead people there.
Right. So in conclusion, and also totally and completely unrelated, I would like to tell you about jury nullification. Jury nullification is when I saw actually this guy doing a TikTok of it, and I was like, it's TikTok, I can't believe it, so I had to go look it up. So that is when a jury, and this is for the full jury, in a criminal trial reaches a not guilty verdict, even though they believe the defendant is guilty. It can happen for many reasons, including the jury believes the law the defendant broke was unjust. The jury believes the prosecutor misapplied the law. The jury believes the punishment is too harsh. The jury has prejudice in favor of the defendant. The jury wants to send a message about a larger social issue.
I didn't know that was a thing. It's not really something they advertise about, the side quest powers of a jury.
It can also happen when the jury believes the result dictated by the law is contrary to their sense of justice, morality, or fairness, and it's not illegal in the USA. This is what happens when a whole jury does that. One person doing that is called a hung jury, and many times can lead to another trial.
That makes more sense to me now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But a hung jury happens when one or more of the jurors is not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that what happened was a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's an uphill battle to get anybody to have any kind of consensus, but especially in something that would have that much impact, like for the whole jury to agree on that type of thing.
Right, but
it must be very
Can
rare.
you imagine if/when the person who did shoot the CEO is tried? What's the first question on your jury questionnaire? Mine would be, have you ever been personally harmed by an insurance company?
Right, finding an impartial jury I don't really think is possible.
People hate insurance companies.
For real reasons.
People hate companies that do things that are intentionally bad. All you have to do is look at the lawsuits won by family members of people who died from smoking-related illnesses.
Yeah, no.
Like in the 80s, they were getting like millions.
Companies will lie until they don't have to. That's just true. Again,
Right.
Humans as individuals tend to be generally nice people.
Yeah.
Humans as herd animals are awful.
Ugh, yeah. So if you need some further reading on jury nullification, I will direct you to the 1996 trial of Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Jack Kevorkian, he is also known as Dr. Death. He did assisted suicide, but he was acquitted by the jury because, yeah, he did assist with the suicides, but they didn't think it was a crime because of the situation. I believe it was like a lot of terminally ill people and things like that. So euthanasia made me think of anesthesia, which reminded me, so the day before, maybe a few days before, the shooting of the healthcare CEO, Blue Cross, I think it's Aetna Blue Cross, said, we're only going to pay for as much anesthesia as your doctor or surgeon originally says you need. Like if they say the surgery is going to take 4 hours, but it takes 6, we're only paying for 4.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. The day after this shooting that seems to have brought out the fact that we don't care about rich people anymore, they were like, oh, just kidding. That was a really bad idea.
Yeah, I'd step that back too. That's an interesting cause and effect moment.
It is. So once again, I'm here to tell you that vigilante justice is illegal. I'm just here to present historical facts. And
illegal does not mean not interesting.
Right. By the time you hear this, it's going to be historical.
We make history every single day.
Go like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Share us on whatever social media platform you use. And we appreciate you.
Thank you for listening.
See you next time. Bye. Bye.